I'm Sharon Calvert, and this is Eye on Tampa Bay. Today, I'm in Ybor City, and I'm interviewing Mike Perotti. He's a Republican running against the Democrat incumbent, Andrew Warren, for the state attorney in the November election. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Mike, let's start off by telling us something about yourself and why did you decide to run?
All right. Something about myself. Let's see. I'm a third-generation Tampa native. I come from a family that has been entrenched in public service for decades and decades now. Have a West Tampa background, and I guess when you have grown up in this area and you start to develop a love and a passion for the community and the roots that we have here, you see how special Tampa is. And after now almost 20 years or so, or just over 20 years of following my own path in my professional career, starting as a state attorney here in Hillsborough County, working as in-house counsel for the sheriff's office, having my own law firm and representing all sorts of folks, criminal defendants, plaintiffs, civil defendants, you name it, and then having an opportunity to be a commander and being one of the majors and colonels in the detention system here in Hillsborough County. You look back and you reflect on that career, and you think about the lessons you've learned, the things you've seen, the realities you've been exposed to, both with regard to the successes and the problems of our local criminal justice system. And so now at this point in my career, as I'm 48 years old, still got a lot of gas left in the tank, and you wake up one morning and you realize you can do more, and that you should do more. And at a time right now where we have what I believe is an absolute critical need for strong leadership, and leadership is dedicated to principles of right and wrong and what's best for the community, the entire community, as opposed to partisan politics or empty narratives or hashtags and promises that don't get held up. How about leaders that just always keep their word and only tell you the truth even when the truth hurts or when the truth is difficult? We'll disagree with somebody when it's time to disagree, and we'll passionately support those things that I think we all agree with. That was the motivator. I've got 2 daughters growing up in this town, and I think I owe whatever I can offer at this point in time to try to give them a community they can be proud of, and part of solving some of the problems that we're clearly facing right now. So that was it. Out of the shadows, out of always just trying to be a good loyal employee to other folks, and recognizing that I was ready to try and ask for the trust and confidence of this community to let me call my own shots. Let me be the one that is ultimately accountable for whatever it is that comes from my office and the folks that go on that journey with me. And let all those folks, and there's 300 employees at that office, let them experience the joy of feeling good about what you do and knowing you got the support of the community. And let me just enjoy that aspect with them a little bit. Let me take the heat when there's something wrong. I'm just, something about me, I just like it that way.
Well, it's refreshing to hear about accountability, because sometimes that seems to be a missing link in public service. So what do you see as some of the problems with the current state attorney's office?
Well, and if you start off just on a very broad scale, and these are 3, I don't make promises very often to anybody, hardly ever actually. And the 3 that I've been making in opportunities like this is that what you can expect from me is I will always be authentic. I am what I am. I'm not a politician. I'm a decision maker. I have tried to bring whatever I can to bear in my professional experience to try to help people to try to fix problems. So you don't have to worry about me spinning or becoming a different animal than what I am. I'm authentic that way. I will always be accountable. That's the word that we just talked about, which I believe is really the central demand that I keep getting from everybody when you talk about who they're voting for any office. They just want somebody to be accountable. And I think that the last part of that is they want availability. They want to know that regardless of what neighborhood they're from, or whether they're a very well-connected, powerful person in the community, or whether they're just your average Joe in the community. They can pick the phone and their elected officials will be available for them and be willing to stand and answer questions. So when I look at what's going on right now at the state attorney's office, I believe that in 2016, based on some concerns or frustrations that some of the local community was feeling, they gave this gentleman a chance to get in there and to affect some change. And I'll be very candid and honest in saying that some of the programs and some of the notions that were brought to bear, I'm in favor of. But like anything that is sold, any package that is brought to bear, they must be done correctly and they must be done intelligently. So I look at that office right now, and what I see pretty obviously is a lack of strong leadership within the office, starting with Mr. Warren himself. And Andrew's a nice guy. I'm not here to bash Andrew. But when you have different outcomes occurring in different divisions and different attorneys handling things different ways, so that an accused person in this division is likely not to necessarily get the same opportunity in another division for the same charge or the same thing, that's a problem. When you talk about programs that are designed to help people with, whether it's mental health or veterans or individuals with substance abuse, I'm all for it. I'm all in favor of that. But let's make sure that we are not allowing people who are actually violent or career repeat offenders get into those programs, because those aren't the ones those are business people who have made a calculated decision to engage in what they're doing. And I'm firsthand aware of seeing people that have, violent histories, weapons charges, narcotic sales, now still getting the benefit of some diversion program, and to me that's unacceptable. I look at the violence going on in our at-risk communities right now, the gun violence, the amount of the body count that is stacking up there, and these are our at-risk communities that can't afford any more harm, any more crime, any more tragedy going on there, and yet you see nothing but escalations over the last year and a half in those areas, and that's not acceptable. I believe when you talk about accountability, what we're looking for is knowing that regardless of your affluence or the color of your skin, you are going to get the same outcome that anybody else would. Whether that means, having a very serious sanction because you've now just committed a crime against our public that we won't stand for, or getting a rehabilitative opportunity. Let's just make sure that it's equal, and let's make sure it's all done the right way. Juvenile diversion is something we've got to focus on, but what are we doing to make sure that we're actually making an impact on those young kids, so that we don't just see crime after crime after crime after crime, and all they're getting is a slap on the wrist, and not ever changing their ways.
So what would you see as some remedies that you would like to see put in place to resolve some of these?
So first and foremost, when I get into that office, I want to make sure that the expectations for all of my staff are loud and clear. We're going to do things with absolute integrity, with availability to the victims, make sure that the victims' needs and wants are put at the center of our model, and we are going to be absolutely transparent and consistent to the individual person and division throughout that office from day one. And folks that don't want to go on that journey with me, we will find replacements for them. I want to see more diversity at that office, by the way. If you really want to accurately represent a community, make sure that the individuals that you've hired to undertake that task properly reflect the diversity of your community. And I don't see a lot of that when I look at his office. But when you talk about the programs, let's talk about the kids for a second. Again, what I don't want to do is promote an absentee parent type thing. It's the kid that never got in trouble, no matter how many times they did things when they were growing up, and then we wonder why they turned out to be a jerk when they were an adult. Well, I see these children that don't have the benefit of great role models, that don't have the best schooling opportunities, and mind you, some of those challenges are outside the purview of the office I'm seeking. But let's say an individual juvenile comes to me on the fence and we can try and divert them. What I want to do is reestablish that connection and that endeavor with the community, so that if I'm sentencing a kid to say do some community service as part of their diversions, you're going to go do community service in your neighborhood with a community task force made up of the leaders from that neighborhood, and with the pastors and everybody else You hurt that community, now go spend some Saturdays cleaning up that community. That's effective now. That's a way to get attention of somebody and hopefully change outcomes. In addition, I think so much about what you have to be able to do when you're in one of these essential positions is have relationships. Relationships with the judiciary, relationships with the defense bar, relationships with law enforcement, because all of those separate components, none of them can necessarily dictate or control one another, but it's the dialogue, it's the capacity to influence and affect.
And they work together.
Sure, for good outcomes, because that's how you ensure that one part of the equation is not going rogue and doing things that are not going to be received or appreciated by the other players in that equation. And I think that what you have to have is a relationship not based on I scratch my back, you scratch yours, or we're all going to cover this up together. Relationships on honest discussion and trust and respect, so that when I walk in and have a conversation with the chief judge or one of the other judges or somebody representing the defense bar, they've known me long enough and will understand that I'm coming to them from a position of everything I'm about to tell you is pretty solid. You need to listen, because I would never try to flim-flam you. I'm not trying to sell you a false bill of goods. And what we're going to talk about is something that's going to be in everybody's best interest, especially the community we're serving. And I think those relationships are key, and ensuring that you can find a way to have that philosophy permeate the system. When it's all said and done, what everybody wants and demands is that all of our tax dollars and all of our support for these entities that are supposed to be guarding, protecting, and serving the entire community are doing so intelligently and are doing so in an effective way with great outcomes, and everybody feels safe.
And that's how you build that trust.
You do. You build it over open communication, saying it like it is, and that is something that I'm very comfortable in knowing that I bring to the table for anybody that's been around. Again, not because I sweep stuff under the rug, not because I don't call it like I see it, but because they know exactly the opposite. I do. And so when I sit down and say, hey, we need to talk about something, it will never be received as I want to talk about something for my own personal gain, or I want to talk about something that's going to benefit me or protect me. I want to talk about something that's going to be what the community demands and deserves from us. And
again, I think that's another piece of the puzzle is just the whole honesty issue.
I think it is. I mean, I'm trying to get.
We may not all agree, but we can all be honest with each other.
We can all be honest, and if honesty carries the day, then the message I'm trying to get out to everyone in the community is, I'm giving you an opportunity to vote for somebody who's not a politician, who doesn't even know how to do that well. I get yelled at by my campaign folks all the time because I don't give out cards, I forget, I don't tell people. I've known people for 2 months that I've been talking to, and I forgot to tell them I was running for office. Like, really? Why didn't you tell me? Well, because we were talking about something else. I just didn't think. So, I think that I'm trying to give folks an option to vote for something that I think we need, that I think will be refreshing, and that I think can help provide the types of results that we need now more than ever. The Office of State Attorney is one of the most critical positions that you can have in a community.
So explain that role, because I think some of the voting public may not even understand it.
Sure. So while the state attorney cannot dictate to law enforcement, you shall do this or you may not do that, and while the state attorney can't force judges to give out one sentence or another, it's at the hub. The state attorney sits at the center and is solely responsible for the intake of all criminal charges or arrests made by law enforcement and the analysis of those arrests, the decision on what to do about them from a prosecution standpoint, and this is from your lowest county ordinances all the way up to your most heinous crimes. How do we handle these allegations? And then how do we try to ensure that justice is done working with the judiciary in the most fair and consistent manner? And so when you're talking about a single position that wields great influence and has as much input into the beginning of that process as the outcomes of that process, I'm not aware of another office that's more important than the Office of State Attorney. It's the one where, if you're talking about what does the community want, the community wants to ensure that every person gets a fair shake and is treated the same, regardless of what neighborhood they live in, regardless of the size of their tax return. They want to know it's all going to be fair and the same. And we learned this from when we were kids. No child likes to be treated differently. By, Joey got away with it. Why do I have to pick up my room? I mean, we learned that response back at the earliest ages. Adults aren't any different. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. If you're gonna charge them over here for this, charge them over here for this. And that is such an important role now, today more than ever. Everybody's got to be held accountable in the same way with the same expectations.
And in this interesting time, or what we could say is a divisive time with law enforcement, what do you think that you can do to help reconcile? I mean, there's very groups out there that are, it's quite antagonistic.
Sure.
So when you hold this office, what do you think that you could do to reconcile some of that?
And what's so funny is this question obviously is coming up a lot now, and what amuses me is that the knee-jerk reaction that I hear from folks is, well, because he's grown up in law enforcement or has worked for law enforcement now for so many years, it'll be all buddy-buddy and protecting and protect the blue and sweep things under the rug. And I chuckle, because that could not be further from the truth, and I'll explain why. As an attorney for an agency, you are limited in what you can do or say because it's your client, right? I mean, anybody who's worked as an attorney understands. You look at your defense attorneys out there, they might have a client that committed heinous crimes, murders, rapes, burglaries, whatever the case might be. They can't just run out and shout, hey, look what my client did. Their obligation is to try and represent the client. But what I know after all these years of working for law enforcement is very straightforward. The vast majority of every man and woman wearing a badge trying to do what's right is a good person and is trying very hard to serve in a way that they can feel proud of and the community will appreciate. But like any other profession, there are bad actors, there are men and women who lose their way, and there are mistakes that get made. By virtue of my being on the inside, if you will, behind the wizard's curtain, if we want to talk Wizard of Oz analogies, I know exactly how they're supposed to do it. I know how they've been trained. I know how the warrant was supposed to be executed. I know what the use of force continuum said was supposed to happen on this event. And I don't have to wait for anybody else to explain it to me. So when I go out to a shooting event, as the state attorney should always do, when I go out to a significant moment like an act of protest, and I'm standing there with law enforcement and we are collectively deciding what is the best course of action to balance the First Amendment rights that we must protect here against the need to protect the community and not let harm befall property or person. When I'm out there doing that, I'm already well versed in what you're allowed to do or not allowed to do and what my obligation is as a state attorney. When you look at my track record now, knowing all those things, and I don't say trust me, go do a public records request. Go look at the number of disciplinary actions that were created under my leadership when I was the major, because that's when you really first have the opportunity to initiate disciplinaries on your employees. They always went up when I became the major. I became the major of something, and disciplinary investigations rose. They rose because I am critical. I am unwavering in my expectations of my staff. I want us to be great. I want us to exceed whatever the minimal law requires, because I think that's how you make the badge shine like it's supposed to. So when we talk about accountability, which is what everybody's clamoring for, that's so much of the frustration that you're seeing in the people right now, is they feel like there are different standards being applied to law enforcement versus other folks out there. And what they want to see is that when somebody who wears a badge or is in a position of power makes a mistake or does something inappropriate, that there's somebody in a position that's willing to say something about it, that's willing to do something about it. And again, look back at my record. I've never been afraid to call things exactly what they are, even if it meant taking somebody's job from them. I have personally been responsible for terminating deputies. Deputies are friends of mine. Deputies is it gut-wrenching? Yes. Does it hurt my heart? Yes. But we took an oath to do right and wrong. So accountability and making sure that my office does its part to call things like it is and to hold everybody accountable when that opportunity arises is certainly part of the equation. My hope, and this is the big part that's going to change from day one, my hope and my plea is that local law enforcement officials, whether you're talking about Tampa Police Department or Sheriff's Office or anywhere else, that they will take a real hard look at reinvesting and committing into the community-oriented policing philosophies. I don't want to go on a long rant about that model and what it means. Everybody who listens to this that knows policing will know what I'm talking about. But I believe that in law enforcement, our well-intended focus on intelligence-led policing over the last years has perhaps created this breakdown in trust and communication because we weren't spending as much time focusing on the community and on the needs of the community. And as I go through and talk to the leaders from various aspects of the smaller communities in Tampa, they feel like that trust and that rapport and that communication line has eroded. And when you don't have that with the men and women that are serving, you don't have the trust, you don't have that relationship to build upon to make decisions together when it matters the most. So I think that's what I'm hopeful law enforcement will bring into the equation. My obligation is to hold the line and hold everybody accountable, even when it breaks my heart. And I will absolutely do that, no doubt.
So with a pandemic underway, this is, I think, what everyone would call an odd election year for campaigning. So do you have any thoughts on...
I do. Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts.
On campaigning during a pandemic.
Yeah, well, here's the good news. The good news is, since I'm not a politician, I've never done this before, I have no idea that this is weird. This is just what I know. I just guess this is all campaigns go. You can't shake hands, you can't go see people, you got to do things from behind a camera, so it's business as usual as far as I'm concerned. No, I do not come from wealth. I do not come from political affluence. My name doesn't resonate in the halls of Tallahassee or anywhere else like that. And I entered this race February 6th of 2020. If those of you that go with your calendars will recognize that was 4 weeks before the COVID-19 shutdowns began. So timing is everything. Trying to get out and meet people and spread your message is certainly challenging when you cannot do the conventional meet and greets and come, let's have 1,000 people show up and let me do a huge rally and stuff like that. But I think that hopefully through formats like the one we're having here today, as long as there's an opportunity to get my message out, to introduce myself a little bit, that's all I can hope for and ask. I think that, again, I'm a lifelong Republican, but you can tell by listening to them, probably very moderate Republican and very much about right and wrong. And I'm a steadfast supporter of our Constitution, our constitutional rights. I'm a textualist when it comes down to how we interpret things in the law and from the Constitution. The words mean exactly what they mean. I believe in separation of powers and all that stuff, but today more than ever, I think that it's incumbent upon voters to do their research, find out about the candidates for real, not just what somebody told you, not just because they have an R next to their name or a D next to their name, because I don't know if that tells you a whole lot anymore. Listen to what they say, listen to what their experience has been and what they have, the mechanics and the real capacity to bring to the table. And I believe that this COVID-19 situation is hopefully focusing everybody into having a real message and providing different theaters and opportunities to get that message across. So on an unrelated note, I think that one of the greatest challenges we have as a nation right now, globally, I guess you could say, is trying to get straight facts and truth from any source. You feel like everything's a spin job. Everything is some sort of a managed, watered down or watered up version of where the truth is, and it takes a lot of effort by voters and by citizens to stay informed. you've got to work. You've got to be willing to dig. You've got to be willing to do your own research, try to filter through the misinformation. So, I certainly get that, and I'm living that right now.
Yeah.
I was proud to have the endorsement of Attorney General Ashley Moody here recently, and there will be others that come down the pipe. But again, as much as I say I'm proud to have that because I do believe that she's a good person who's done a good job, it doesn't mean that just because Ashley Moody believes one thing that I necessarily believe one thing. Do your homework, find out about it. It doesn't mean that I'm cheering over here or absolutely set to condemn this over here. Come ask me. That's what everybody do. I'm not hard to find.
So, just tell our viewers, how can somebody become engaged or with your campaign or donate to it? Or
I'll tell you what, my website is www.mikeperotti, and that's PEROTTI.com. I know, very snazzy. There's a lot of real deep thought on what to name it. It's very catchy. And I'm on Facebook as well as Mike Perotti for State Attorney. Both of those pages will have some background bio info that kind of fills in a little more detail to what we talked about here today. And I'm running very much a grassroots campaign. Again, I don't have some big, dark, deep, secret PAC behind me. I don't have some wealthy, out-of-state person who's the kingmaker behind things. I'm Mike Perotti from Tampa. And so the more the merrier, and every bit of support and spreading the word helps. Like and share things you see. Please share. Have people follow on my Facebook page, because if it doesn't grow organically, my message will keep going out to the same 3,000-4,000 people over and over again, and it's going to take a lot more than 3,000 or 4,000 voters to win this race. So that's what everybody can do is get involved and listen. There'll be signs coming out here actually later today. There'll be neighborhood walks later in time, but all of that will be very much dependent on what happens with COVID, because I don't know that everybody wants me knocking on their door and saying, hello, let me introduce myself to you, don't breathe on me.
Right.
That sort of thing. So we're
going to be optimistic about that, and in the next several months, we hope.
I will be, and I am very optimistic actually. I get it. Obviously, there are a lot of people who work in law enforcement and public service, knowing my principles and knowing the type of person I am. They have tremendous support for me, knowing full well that I might be the one that absolutely smacks them publicly if they do something wrong. So to be careful what you wish for there. But I have tremendous relationships with so many in the criminal justice system. I know that I've got judges that I'm very close with, and people who are lifelong defense attorneys, private and public and otherwise. And our West Tampa roots with a lot of the local Latin voters and stuff like that, they recognize the name Perotti. They know that my grandfather was a man of great principle. They know that my grandmother was a force to be reckoned with. They know that my father, never broke a promise that he ever made. And they understand that I was raised in that environment. And that your integrity in this world, in this life, is really all you have. All your worldly possessions, everything else you amass will mean nothing if you didn't have your integrity. So,
and that again is a word that's not used enough today. I'll give you time to kind of wrap it up.
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and just hear from you, and hopefully help get your message out.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Would you just like to make some closing remarks?
I would just say to everyone in this community, please. We are at a difficult time. There's a lot of emotion, and it's heartfelt, and it's legitimate. It does get misconstrued. There are the extremes on both ends of the equation that start to manipulate and start to undermine what I think is the need for some honest and sincere dialogue and changes. I'd ask for everybody in the community, please give everybody a chance to let's start talking about solutions, and let's start talking about opportunities to be better tomorrow than we were before, as opposed to just continuing to beat each other up figuratively and literally over things that happened in the past, things that happened last week or last month or last year. Not to forget them, not to let go of them, but to start spending more energy in what we can be than what we have been. If you have a question for me, my website has an email service. Send me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't shy away from anyone or anything. I've got absolutely nothing to hide. So bring your most difficult or more serious questions to me, and I'll be happy to respond as quickly as I can. I appreciate those because, again, that's doing what I asked somebody to do, which is get to know the candidate. If you all give me the opportunity to be your elected state attorney in November, I can assure you, you will never ever regret that. I'm a person of my word. I'm a person of integrity. I'm a person who will never ever do anything other than what's in the best of everyone in this community. No matter how hard or difficult those moments, those times might be, I will always rise to that occasion for you all. So thank you for listening. I appreciate the question and answer opportunity, and I hope you all are able to find your way to vote for Mike Perotti in November's election.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mike.
Appreciate it.